Well, thank you, Stephanie, and the YDN for hosting this debate. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. My name is Ben Eza. I'm senior in Pearson, studying philosophy and global affairs. Or as my mother over there would say, a solid double major in unemployable and delusional. On campus, I'm involved in a wide range of activities. I worked as a mentor at the Black Men's Union. I co-founded the Yale Freestyle Collective, as speaker of the YPU, and volunteered at a local soup kitchen on Fridays. But today, I'm running to be your alder and representative in City Council. This election cycle, we have a very important decision to make between two competing visions for what the Yale-New Haven relationship should be. Over the past 4 years, we've withdrawn within the Yale bubble. Instead of living side by side, lifelong residents of the city, we've withdrawn ourselves further and further in. And Ms. Eidelson has not been helpful in that regard, in part because she believes that the Ward 1 alder is no different than the other 29. I envision a different relationship between our community and the rest of New Haven, one of consistent and open engagement. I've been working alongside people to develop a platform for people who are not normally politically involved to see how they can get more politically involved. And I think we should expect more from our alder and from ourselves. And when I speak with people in the city, for example, people who work in the New Haven Police Department, they tell me we wish Yale students were more involved. So people in the New Haven Police Department tell me, we wish we had Yale students who could work with us to work on the demographics of crime in the city. Or people in the homeless shelters who say that we used to have Yale students volunteer here weekly, but we don't have them anymore. And we want Yale students to be able to help us work with homeless clients to work on resumes. I think over the course of this debate, you'll hear my thoughts on homelessness and education and policy. Policies that I've worked alongside with my bipartisan team. And my team is composed of people from all over the political spectrum. People who are Bernie Sanders supporters, people who are libertarians, former members of Fish's campaign, former members of Sarah's campaign, fiscal conservatives, the whole 9 yards. And I think that speaks to how my message resonates with people here on campus. So that's time. All right, well, thank you all for coming, and I look forward to a great debate.
By thanking the YDN and Stephanie for hosting this debate, and in particular by thanking all of you for taking the time to be here and listen to us talk this evening, and even more so for engaging more broadly in the conversations we've been having through this election. For me, my first introduction to politics happened through the West Wing. When I was a kid, I had 2 older brothers who were very into politics, and I wanted to be just like them, so I would hang out with them while they were watching The West Wing. But of course, I had no idea what was going on, and my basic takeaway was the change seemed to happen on the show through charismatic, tall men making speeches and gesticulating. If you have had the chance to make your way across the green to City Hall to see how we do it at the Board of Alders, you will know that that is unfortunately not how change happens. And it would be great if it were. If we could pass a resolution saying there will now be no more jobs crisis in New Haven, that would be amazing. But unfortunately, that has not been my experience. I, as a student at Yale, tried a lot of different ways to be a part of positive change here, and I think my most memorable experience of being in City Hall was not governing, but was during Occupy, when there was a rally that filled the building, and I heard this young woman, who's now a good friend of mine, speak about her experience of seeing her cousin get caught in the crosshairs and choosing from that place of fear for her family and her community to stand up at a rally and talk about it.
Cool. So the following first question for both candidates comes from the editorial board of the Yale Daily News. Both of you are running with an affiliation to a political party. In what ways are you aligned with the party with which you are affiliated, and on which issues do you diverge? And we'll start this time with Sarah.
I'm part of the Democratic Party because I think it's the party of inclusion. I believe in government that serves to bring people together and is founded on the principle that we're stronger when we look out for one another, and that we actually, each of us, have a responsibility to do that we're not each out for ourselves. I think that, you can see that in the work that we do as alders. We function on a very local scale, as you all know, and we are able to make bigger change when we look beyond ourselves and beyond each of our individual wards and look out for each other to try and do something larger. I think that the principles that I see in the Republican Party that are against my right to choose what I do with my body, my right to marry who I want to, the rights of immigrants to be here, I think that's not what New Haven is about, and it's certainly not a party that I could imagine being a part of. Is that time? Can you just tell us what the signals are? Okay.
Just to clarify, 30 seconds, you'll see a hand. At the end of 2 minutes, you'll hear a bang.
Gotcha.
Sweet. So this might go. Awesome. Okay. So I think first I would say that my team is bipartisan. Like I said in my opening, we have people from all over the political spectrum. And I think that kinds of ideas that I'm putting forward as a candidate kind of speaks to the way my message resonates with people here on campus and here in the city. I think that, when speaking about the party label, I don't think it's useful to think of it in terms of, national labels between Democrat and Republican. Local politics is necessarily nonpartisan. There's no Democrat or Republican way to clean a street or to run a homeless shelter. I think that the way that we need to think of this is as a race between a failed status quo and a healthy and refreshing alternative, and a new vision between the Yale-New Haven relationship. I think what I encourage people to do over the course of this debate and afterwards as well is to look beyond the party label and look at my ideas. Because our campaign is the one that's pushing conversations on things like the environment and campaign finance reform and homelessness in ways that we didn't hear during the Democratic primary and that we haven't heard in past races for Ward 1 seat before. So I think that's the way that we need to think of this race. And I think, yeah.
The following 6 questions are a selection of the most popular submitted to the YDN by students and organizations over the past few days. They were chosen for their ability to provide both candidates an opportunity to speak on some key issues facing the campus, the ward, and the city. So we'll start with one from Ruth Penner, speaking as a representative of the Yale Hunger and Homelessness Action Project. What do you see as the Ward 1 Alder's role in combating hunger and homelessness in New Haven, and how would you address those issues if elected?
Wonderful. So I think first I should say that there is a certain way that people talk about homelessness policy in the city that I think is very wrong. Our city's homeless are not just another statistic or percentage. These are real people with real lives who have varying circumstances. And I think that the way that we should tailor our homelessness policy should be tailored to different types of homelessness that we see within the city. So as an alder, if I get elected, some of the things I'll be passing or trying to work with people on the board on will be doing things like finding data for the number of young adult homeless people in the city. Finding ways that we can provide shelters specifically tailored to trans youth who are homeless, who are most susceptible to violence within the city. Seeing if we can push for a housing first initiative so that when affordable housing developers take in homeless clients, we get them housed first before we deal with the other issues that they may be facing, either with substance abuse or mental health. But so those are all the things I can do on the policy end. But again, I think that the reason why we have this Ward 1 Alder seat is because of the special relationship that we want to have between Yale community and New Haven at large. And so some of the things that I want to work on is, for example, see if we can expand programs like Project Homeless Connect, which does things like free haircuts and manicures and pedicures to homeless clients and helps them get connected with employers within the city. Seeing if we can find ways to organize, like I said in my opening, mentorship program and programs that bring people here at Yale to work alongside the directors of homeless shelters. See if we can, again, work with their homeless clients and give back to the city that really needs so much. But I think that the way that we need to think about homelessness policy needs to be looked at these two fronts. And I have 30 seconds. And I think that, hopefully when you cast your ballot on November 3rd, I don't want you to just vote for what sounds like nice homelessness policies, but I encourage you to come up and talk with me, like I've been talking with people in YHAP and other organizations on campus, see how we as a community can give back and address this issue.
For me, my work around the issue of homelessness has been particularly focused around youth homelessness in the city. I have been the chair of the Youth Services Committee on the board, and through that committee we have been doing work to try to figure out how we create the network of supports to have every young person in New Haven have the same opportunity to be successful and have what they need. So through our committee and through the Human Services Committee on the board, we do a lot of work around funding our homeless shelters and services. But something I'm really excited about is a new project that we just announced this summer, which is the Escape Teen Center, which is going to be opening up on Gough Street and will include a new space focused in particular on sheltering homeless young people and supporting them. I think that we're making progress toward that vision, but I agree that we have a lot more work to do, and I think we need to look at the whole picture. We need to look at the support services that we provide for people who are already homeless. We need to also, I imagine we'll get more chances to talk about this tonight, but I think the issue of jobs in the city is incredibly important and relevant. We need to actually be looking at the full situation that's facing our neighborhoods so that we're not just looking at hunger in a vacuum or at unemployment in a vacuum or violence in a vacuum. We need to actually be committed to doing the work it'll take to support people and to address the issues of unemployment that are at the root of a lot of these challenges.
For the people in the back, there are more seats, so feel free to come down. So next we have a student question. In recent years, student activism on campus has addressed issues such as fossil fuel divestment, the student income contribution, mental health reform, and funding the cultural centers. Where do you stand on these issues? And as Ward 1 Alder, what do you think your role should be in engaging with such activism?
Where I stand on those issues. Well, I'll run through them simply first. I think that the student income contribution should be eliminated immediately. I think that Yale should divest from fossil fuels and a whole host of other investments that the university is making to make more money that give us, as Yale students, a bad name. I think that every student and every worker at Yale should have access to the mental health care that we need. And that if Yale is serious about diversifying the undergraduate student body and the faculty, that they need to show that seriousness by adequately funding the cultural centers, among many other steps that are urgently needed. I think that it is disgusting that right now Yale spends more money on its hedge fund managers than on financial aid for its students. And I think in terms of my role in that, I have been, out protesting alongside a lot of you around several of these issues. I think that as the Ward 1 Alder, I can lend my voice. I think I can stand with you. I can fight to make sure that when you are trying to have your voice heard, that your rights to do that aren't being infringed upon by the administration. And we can press harder to make those changes happen when we're doing it together and when we're bringing other members of the Yale community and beyond into those campaigns.
So that's a really, really, really awesome question, because I think it's something that's been on my mind over the past few months as I was running. So I think I'll also run through each issue and then talk about where I think the broader role should be. So I think that, this is why it's so important that we have a Ward 1 Alder that's present. In each of these issues, there's a certain way, it's not just enough to say we're in support or against one of these initiatives. It's more important to be able to work with people alongside them to see how we can push the conversation on these things and actually get meaningful results. So on the student income contribution, I think that it should be obviously eliminated. I mean, as someone who's on financial aid and who has many friends who are on financial aid, it's a big barrier to our ability to study and do well here at Yale. But there are other things that we need to think about in connection with it. So I have my friend JT here, who's sitting here, who started a Leg Up, right, which is giving resources to low-income students here at Yale to help navigate the system. And they talk about things like getting resources over winter break, right, because many students don't have a place to go when they go for winter break, or getting money for textbooks. I think on an issue like this, the role of the Ward 1 Alder should be meeting with these people who are pushing and advocating on these things and finding new ways that we can help and address questions that are not thought of in the initial conversation. On the question of divestment, I also agree that the university should probably divest. Peter Swenson, the CIO of Yale, has also indicated that he's thinking about doing the same because it just makes economic sense to divest from high carbon emitting fuels. But I think that, again, we need to, have a fruitful conversation about what are we looking for and what commitments Yale should be making to lower its carbon impact. On the cultural centers, I think that's something that's very close to my heart because I'm very involved, especially with the AFM House, La Casa, and NACC. We had 2 town hall meetings about the state of the cultural centers. I went to both of them. I don't think Sarah was not at either one. There were a couple things that were talked about. Not just conversation about getting funding for the resources, but having deans that are accountable to student bodies in each of these groups, which is a very, very important thing for especially students of color who don't know, who again come from different backgrounds and don't know how to navigate the university proper. That's my time. But again, I think the moral of the story is that we need someone who's engaged with the campus, who knows the questions that need to be asked and can push the conversation forward.
The next student question is, what are your plans to address the 20% unemployment rate among Black and Latino residents?
Oh, is it me?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I was like, oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I think this is an issue that we need to look at on a bigger scale. I think that there are many factors that contribute to unemployment here within the city. Like you mentioned, 20% of Black residents in New Haven are unemployed, with 17% versus 10% of white residents. Within high schools, there's a 25% dropout rate between Black and Latino students versus a 10%, again, for white students. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we have this kind of correlation between these two. So I think addressing unemployment is first pushing for programs to, of course, expand employment opportunities within New Haven, but also looking for the structural barriers to employment here in New Haven. I mean, New Haveners, there's a poor public education system, high rates of illiteracy. I think that the kinds of things that we need to do is create programs, especially between students here on campus, to connect with people within the city, but also with among city policymakers to address these issues. So groups like Literacy Every Day and New Haven Reads, who do a lot of work to address the 10% of New Haven adults who read at the 6th grade level or lower, which is a big barrier to a lot of the mid to high level skill jobs that are coming into the city, are very good initiatives that we should be supporting. Groups like New Haven Promise, again, who provide opportunities for high school students to be able to go to college within the city. And again, addressing the achievement gap within high schools that also presents a structural barrier to employment. So I think we need to look at these issues holistically. I don't think it's possible, if you're a New Haven student and you're facing a 1 in 4 chance of dropping out of high school, or if you're a New Haven resident and you have the eviction notice slapped onto your door, that we should only look at this one issue. I think we need to look at the way that all these issues feed into each other and address it at a very holistic level. And the last thing I should say is that there are groups on campus that do great work on this, things like the Elm City Initiative, many groups out of Dwight Hall. And I think that my role as Ward 1 Alder would be to work with these groups, connect them with city resources, and see how we can how Yale students can play their part in addressing unemployment here in the city.
So as Stephanie said, we are facing a crisis, 20% unemployment in our communities of color. And I absolutely believe in programs like New Haven Reads. I think they're incredibly important, and I have been proud to support them and to advocate for funding for them. But so many New Haven residents are qualified for the jobs that exist here. And I think that it's extremely disrespectful to suggest that New Haven residents can't get jobs because they can't read. The reality of the situation is that there are 83,000 jobs in this city and 2,000 that are held by New Haven residents in those communities of color. And in terms of what I would do about that, I am really proud of the work that our board has done to establish New Haven Works and to create a pipeline to get New Haven residents matched with jobs that they are qualified for and to get commitments from employers to hire them. We've placed over 600 people in good jobs through that program so far. But there are thousands more behind them who are waiting, struggling to get a job. And employers in New Haven, especially big ones like Yale, need to do more. A crisis like this requires leaders to step up and actually look the problem in the eye. And Yale could be doing that as the largest employer in the city. And they need to, because we need that kind of leadership if people are going to get a shot and we're going to bring our city forward.
I got the So I think
You have 1 minute.
I get 2 1-minute rebuttals, right?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. Okay, so I think first I should say that I'm surprised that Sarah or Ms. Eidelson says that this is disrespectful, because what I just said about the issue of illiteracy and employment was from a study that was actually pursued by the Board of Alders themselves with the Workforce Alliance that came out last year, right? We're living in a city where 10% of New Haveners are reading at a 6th grade level or lower. A third of New Haveners, are reading at the lowest 20% of literacy possible. Right? We're talking about a city where 25% of high school students are dropping out, and where 25% of people live below the poverty line. So I think if we're not willing to have these conversations that talk about the structural barriers to employment here in New Haven, I don't think it's just enough to look at Yale to do strictly all employment.
How would you work with the university to more effectively utilize campus resources for city improvement?
Well, that's a good segue from the last question. I do think that jobs are a substantial piece of that. Yale is at the very center and the heart of New Haven, and I think that as the largest employer and really the largest institution, Yale has a real responsibility to the rest of the city. I think that we as students and as New Haven residents who are part of this community need to be pressing and holding them to a higher standard around that. The contribution that the university makes to New Haven is extremely important, and it's not large enough. The endowment earns more interest in a single day than the university contributes to the city of New Haven every year. And as Ward 1 Alder, I think that we need to be leading and having a real conversation about that. But I also think that we as individuals can be a resource, and as citizens we can get out there and we can be partners with people in the surrounding community in pushing for the kinds of changes that we want to see. And each of us is our own resource. And so I think that, we need to both be pushing Yale and other large institutions in the city to step up and do more to address these crises. And each of us ourselves also has a set of choices to make about how we're going to engage. And I think that we need to take that very seriously.
So I guess there are 2 ways to look at this question. I think the first is on the question of Yale's financial engagement with the city. Yale is the largest employer, and I think that a lot of what the Board of Alders should be looking to do is find different ways to have sustainable development and expansion within the city, especially when Yale buys up streets or writes parking meters in different situations. But I think that's one conversation, and I think that that's something that I have very strong opinions on. But I think that what's fitted to my role as a Ward 1 Alder, as a specific representative from the Yale community to city government, is looking at the different ways that Yale itself is involved in city policy. So for example, there's people like Karen King in the Office of New Haven Affairs who do amazing work, working alongside the city to open up programs for people in the city to come to campus and engage with the Yale community proper, and seeing how we can have fruitful relationships between the Yale community and New Haven proper. Or the Office of Sustainability, which was very instrumental in the recent program Go New Haven Go, which opened up new bike routes and more efficient bus transportation routes within the city. So I think that's one way we should look at it. As my role as a student here on campus and as a student representative on the Board of Alders, I think that my job would be to find different ways to get Yale students who are not politically involved or not well involved in the city to get more involved. And working with people in the city to find where are those opportunities where we can give back. And I've already started doing this. So right now I'm working with different engineering groups to organize mentorship programs between students here on campus and women and minority students here in the city. To again, see how we can address the achievement gap and how do we encourage women and minority students to enter STEM. I've already started also talking and working with artists here at Yale, see how we can collaborate efforts between artists here at Yale and artists in New Haven to organize arts classes for middle school students. and hopefully do like regular public works projects here within the city. But I think there are multiple layers that I think the Ward 1 Alder should be thinking about the Yale-New Haven relationship. And I think that the reason why we have the seat is so that we have someone who's committed and has the personal connections and the know-how of campus culture within Ward 1 to be able to best utilize those resources.
What sort of balance should the Ward 1 Alder strike between constituent services on Yale's campus and issues that affect the rest of the city?
It's me this time. Here we go. So again, this is a very, very, very important question. I think that when we think about the Ward 1 Alder seat, the Ward 1 Alder is elected by Yale students, yes, and represents people here in Ward 1. But the kinds of issues that the Ward 1 Alder addresses and works on, it's not the same as people in other wards. Yale has its own police department, it cleans its own streets, which are issues that people in other wards in the city, or resources that people in other wards in the city don't quite have. So I think that the way I envision my role as Ward 1 Alder would be something along the lines of, I meet with people in other parts of the city to see where Yale students should get more involved, where the Yale community can be more involved, and then create those avenues and connect the Yale campus to the city at large. I think that the Ward 1 Alder exists to serve the city. The kinds of bills I'll be passing on, the people I'll be working with, will be residents of the city. But I think that the kinds of issues that I will be addressing will be the ones that people in the city have identified and where Yale students can really help out. So, for example, when people in the Board of Education say, we have all this data and we don't want to have to hire Rand Corporation again to be able to compile it and find out different trends within it. I can say, yes, I know people at the Roosevelt Institute and Dwight Hall who can do this research for free, who want to do this as part of like their senior thesis, right? And give back to the community. We have 5,000, very talented people, a ward with all these resources, and I think it's a shame that's not being utilized. So I think that's how I envision the role. Then there's another element, again, the third element, which is that many of the issues that affect New Haveners also affect us, right? So issues, for example, of homelessness, where we come across people who are homeless day by day. I have many friends or personal friends with the homeless here in New Haven who walk by the Green and are very upset that there aren't the kinds of resources that need to be given to them available. And I can say, yes, those are kind of issues where it affects New Haven residents, but also affects us in some way. So yeah, that's my 2:45 answer.
I have found in my experience that the work of constituent services in Ward 1 is almost always the same as the work that I want to be pursuing for the city as a whole. We do have a lot of resources and a lot of services that are provided by Yale, and we're very lucky to have that. But I think that the kinds of changes that we want to see are the same as most of my colleagues on the board. I think that we want our neighborhood and the neighborhood surrounding it to be safer, and we want to see vibrant and inclusive development happening that's affordable for us and for people in our surrounding communities. And for me, I think some of the best ways that I can represent Ward 1 are by building the kinds of relationships and partnerships with my colleagues on the Board of Alders that enable me to take on big citywide issues that we care about, and to work together with them to get that kind of large-scale programming in motion. I think that all of those initiatives go better when more people are getting involved in the process. And on campus, each initiative that I have led has gained momentum, and the quality of the legislation and the campaign has gotten stronger when you guys have gotten more involved. And we do that in a lot of different ways, from folks who come to me with often wacky ideas about laws that they would like to see passed, to folks who want to know what other alders are working on and come down and testify. We have student representatives on our Board of Education right now, in large part because some folks here have had experiences of getting to serve on a Board of Education in your hometown and said, this made a really big difference, and we need young people in the city to have more of a voice, and we're willing to put some work into making that happen. happen.
That's okay. The last of our questions that were submitted by student organizations come from our friends at the Politic. Sanctuary cities have been in the news a lot recently. New Haven is one of those cities and is home to a large population of undocumented residents. Do you support the idea of sanctuary cities, and what rights do you believe undocumented residents are entitled to as members of the New Haven community? Should city government comply and aid federal deportation orders? So, Sarah, would you like to?
Yeah. I am extremely proud to be part of the government of a sanctuary city, and I absolutely do not think that we should aid the federal government in carrying out deportation orders. New Haven is an extremely diverse city in all sorts of different ways, and we are made stronger by being a place where people from all sorts of places and all kinds of backgrounds can come together and find a home. And I think that as an elected official, my responsibility is quite the opposite to the framework of the question. I think that we have a responsibility to support all residents of New Haven, documented or undocumented. And I think the ways that we can and need to do that range from those kinds of high-level policy decisions to the more grassroots and specific ones that come up. You know, I was at City Hall yesterday with a group of students and the owners of the food trucks on York Street who got kicked out recently, campaigning, pressing, delivering the petition signatures they've gathered to try to have a fair process for them to get to come back and bring their businesses back there. And I think that the way that our city treats its residents who are often the most vulnerable reflects on the way that we treat people in general and the way that we should be assessed.
Yeah, so I think this is a very complex question and a very difficult one. And I think that a lot of times when we talk about, the status of either sanctuary cities or immigration, we lack compassion in talking about, the very people who are involved. I think that, as a personal matter, I don't quite know enough about the issue to take a stance. It's the kind of thing I think I should learn more about. I think that, however, what I can say is that what I do know is that we do need to expand resources and opportunities within New Haven for many of our city's residents. Working on things like expanding ESL in local high schools, or reinvigorating New Haven Boost, which ran out of funding, but was a program that spoke to the well-being of students within high schools. I think that we also need to have a fruitful conversation, a real conversation about issues of wage theft within here, and thinking about, are we giving, our residents, the resources that they need to be able to live fruitful lives? But I think it's a very complex question, and I think that it's the kind of thing I would prefer having a conversation with people about.
So next, both candidates will take a question from the York Club Democrats. What community support do you have for your campaign? And for this, we'll start with Sarah.
My campaign, sorry, I'm chuckling. My campaign has been a lot of fun. And I think it's in part because of the mix of Yale students and folks from the broader New Haven community who have been a part of it. I am really honored to be a candidate who youth activists from around the city want to be knocking on doors with. And it's been really awesome to have so many young people out there with us. It's also really meant a lot to have so many of my colleagues on the Board of Alders be out knocking on doors. It means a lot to me that 2/3 of them have endorsed my campaign, and I honestly, the thing that has been humbling to me, even before that, was this spring when my colleagues on the Board of Alders voted and elected me to the position of minority leader. Having that sort of vote of confidence from this group of truly amazing community leaders who I get to work with is extremely humbling, and having that support when it comes to governing and not just campaigning really means very much to me. So I'm proud to have that mix of people on the campaign, but even more proud to be working with them every day.
So I think this entire process has been incredibly humbling for me. I've had a wave of support from friends, from my family in the back, people from who I grew up with, who are really excited about what I'm doing and where I'm trying to push the conversation about the issues we face here in New Haven. This morning I went down to get a haircut, and my barber was like, "Yo, what's up, man? Like, what's going on? Good luck with the race. Yo, you gonna kill at the debate." Why is your voice that deep? So I think I've gotten a lot of support from throughout the community for this race, and I think even here on KL's campus I've gotten a lot of support from people who normally said that I'll be their first Republican vote that they'll ever cast, and probably the last they'll ever cast, because of the stances I'm taking on many issues like campaign finance reform, like the environment, like on issues like homelessness. Professors of mine who have given me high fives, they've given me back papers that I now have to revise, who've told me we're very excited to see what you're doing and that you're applying what you're learning in class to what you're trying to do in the community. So I've been very humbled by all the support that we've received for this effort. I'm so grateful for my campaign team as we pushed through the last week, who's worked tooth and nail on this campaign. Yeah, I love this whole experience.
And the last of our questions tonight comes from the Yale College Republicans. What is your unique style of leadership, and how do you believe that this leadership style can produce the change that New Haven's Ward 1 deserves?
So I've been told that I have a quirky but opening personality. Take that for what you will. I think that the kind of leadership style that I have and I envision carrying into this role is one of constant and open and committed engagement with the community here at Yale and also to the community in New Haven. For one thing, I think I hope to do in this role is first start off by passing more regular emails. I think we've only gotten 5 campus-wide emails from our current representative over the past 2 years. I think that we should be having more engagement and more updates about what's going on in the city. I think also I love to work with people who don't know much about the city but really want to learn more about what they can do for New Haven, or learn about what opportunities exist so that they can work alongside city residents. And that's why I've been meeting with groups that are not normally politically involved. I mean, the engineering group that I'm on the board of, the National Society of Black Engineers, I'm a philosophy major. But very, very bizarre. But they've told me they're very excited to begin these mentorship programs that we're starting, so we can start tackling the achievement gap in local high schools. Or when I met with groups like WISEC or the Office of Sustainability, they said they're excited to see that there's someone running for this role who's willing to start asking really hard questions about what we should be doing about our carbon footprint and how we can lower carbon footprint here in Elm City. So I think that the kind of approach I want to take to this role is one of consistent engagement, one where people will see my face and know, and I'm reaching out to people and letting them know what's going on in the city, giving them updates about what's going on.
Okay, so we will now move to closing statements from each member. Oh wait, no, we don't do the last one. You can.
My leadership style. I think that for the most part, New Haven residents tend to have fairly low expectations for Yale students. And I think that they tend to expect us to come into a conversation thinking that we're better than they are. And that kind of concept that will get thrown around about us being exceptionally talented is extremely dangerous. I think that as a Yaley and a New Haven resident and a leader, I believe in approaching my interactions with other people with humility, and I think that we need to recognize as Yaleys that we get at least as much out of our interactions with the rest of the city as New Haven gets from us. My leadership style, I think, is based on that and is based on the belief that the only way that we're going to be able to make any headway on problems of the scale of our jobs crisis is by building real partnerships, and that is more than having a set of meetings with people. It's about actually committing to them and committing to being a partner in this struggle, whether it's in hours and hours of meetings about, details of legislation, or, going to their kids' kindergarten graduation, whatever it is. I think that we all benefit from those kinds of relationships, and that scale of commitment is what's required to make change in New Haven.
There was an assertion that was made. I think we should push back against it. I don't think that it's fair to say that New Haveners have a low expectation of Yale students. There was a day when I was in the Dwight Hall Day of Service. We went down to Lyric Hall, and the owner of Lyric Hall, basically, he was this guy who bought this place for a very cheap price. He wanted to make a community center down around where he lived in New Hallville. And he was crying because he said that if we didn't have the Dwight Hall Day of Service, if we didn't have Yale students that were coming down and who, working and doing what I was asking and what I needed for Lyric Hall, I would not have been able to make a living and not have been able to create this community center that does so much good. There's so many groups on campus that do so much good for the city. I think that we do need to be mindful about, having that kind of savior complex and trying to go into the city and impose our vision. But I think it's unfair to say that we should have no engagement at all as a result. And I think that what I want to do, and this is the expectation that we do need to push, is that we do need to push Yale students to think of our relationship with the rest of New Haven with responsibility and with respect. And I think that's what I want to push for as the award-winning Alder.
Would you like to use yours?
I may as well, right?
Go ahead.
Last chance. As a Yale student, I took every opportunity I could get my hands on to engage with New Haven. And I think the idea that choosing to approach that work with humility is the same as not engaging is a little bit absurd, to be honest. The question for me is about the way that we engage. We are New Haven residents already. We're here. And we make choices many times every day, political and not, about what kinds of neighbors we're going to be. And I think what's essential is that we recognize that we have those choices and that we can be good neighbors and that we ourselves can have better lives through being a part of this city. But we need to have high expectations for ourselves in that process.
You were second. Would you like to go this time? Sure. Yeah. Can you talk 2 minutes?
Well, I will take the opportunity to again thank you all for being here tonight and for spending this time with us and our ideas. For me, the thing that's most important to me about this election is that we make the choice together to actually believe that our situation could be different. I think we've been talking a lot, I know I've been talking a lot about the state of crisis that we're in. We've been talking about the numbers around unemployment in communities of color. We've been talking about the fact that too many young people in New Haven feel like they have no shot at the life that they want for themselves. And we've been talking about violence. We've made progress in the past few years in bringing down the murder rate, but too many people are still dying in our city. And these kinds of crises are very daunting. And I know for me personally, when I sit down and think about what I'm trying to accomplish as an elder, I can get pretty overwhelmed by the scale of what we're facing. And I can start to feel a little bit disheartened about whether or not I can actually do something about it. But I'm here because I actually do believe that change is possible. And that's a little bit, I think, of a cheesy thing to say, but I say it because it's deeply true, and it's what keeps me fighting. And I think that change is possible for us, but it is definitely not inevitable for New Haven. The question that each of us gets to make is, first, we get to ask whether or not we're going to believe that things could be different for us and for our community overall, and then we get to decide what we're willing to do about it. So,
Okay.
So is this one with everyone twice? Can I stand, or is that too weird to do twice? I'll stand. So, thank you, YDN, for hosting this debate, and thank you everyone for coming out here. I know that everyone is super busy between writing papers or studying for midterms or preparing to go to Hollow Oats. So I know we have all these competing concerns, very important. I'm actually really glad. It means a lot that you guys came here. Over the course of this debate, you heard my ideas and my proposals for how we can get Yale more integrated into the life and well-being of the city of New Haven. You've heard about my bipartisan approach and the conversations that I've been able to push as a candidate on things like campaign finance reform and the environment and homelessness. And I think that if you're concerned about how Yale has receded into the Yale bubble at a time when over a third of New Haven children live below the poverty line, when a fourth of New Haven high school and Black and Latino students in high schools are dropping out, and where we're seeing about 600 to 800 homeless people living without a roof over their heads, then I urge you to vote on Tuesday. And if you're content with the status of Yale's engagement with the city of New Haven, then by all means, vote for the incumbent. If you, however, believe that we can do so much more, that Yale can be much more engaged with the life of the city of New Haven, that we can work side by side our neighbors to address many of the issues that we as a community are facing, then I ask for your vote on Tuesday. But your decision to vote does not stop on November 3rd. And I think that if you decide to vote for me, that is a commitment to work alongside with me beyond November 3rd into the next 2 years to actively engage the New Haven community. Thank you everyone really for coming out. I've been humbled by this entire experience. And have a great Halloween.
The Yale Daily News will be bringing all of you updates throughout the day on Tuesday on our website and Twitter, as well as the election results as soon as we have them. So stay tuned for that. To the candidates, best of luck for Tuesday, and to all of you, thanks for coming.